the motives of the characters in the story, but also to appreciate, we're talking about ancient and medieval history for the 20th of May, 2021, and we're debriefing on Robin and Marian before we go into the lecture. It's also about appreciating what the lifestyle was, and that movie does a pretty good job of showing the lifestyle. I saw another hand. Kayla.
Okay, so why did he decide to go outside of Sherwood to fight instead of having them?
Okay. Robin is not ready to settle down, because settling down means accepting his old age. The sheriff understands that Robin is a little in love with death. He even says that. By the sheriff going out there and challenging him, Robin can't resist accepting the challenge. It's like a person who can't hear shave and a haircut without going 2 bits. You drum around somebody who's compulsive, dun, da, 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 and see if they can avoid going dun, dun. Most people can't. Robin psychologically had to go out and challenge the sheriff. If he didn't do that, he would not be true to himself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I want to say just kind of like it's all down to like essentially it's a movie interpretation of an ancient like legend that may or may not have some basis on a person that actually lived, like the legend of King Arthur.
Yes.
But even though it's a legend, it's still a very good representation of that time.
It's a representation of the time that's good. It's like, look, Gladiator. Gladiator does a great job of showing the clothing Romans wore, the makeup Roman women wore, the way they lived, all that stuff. The only thing that was wrong was everything about the history. Everything about the history was wrong.
The life of Brian.
Yeah.
That's very historically accurate.
In many respects. In many respects. So is Jesus Christ Superstar. In certain respects. Even though they dress like 70s hippies. Okay. Last words on Robin and Marian before we go further into the lecture.
I just have a question. So, what justification did the sheriff of Nottingham use for turning it?
It was in his...
Not in my county. It's the sheriff again and again tells Sir Ranulph, you are not the boss of me in my county. Period. That's it. The oath, Sir Ranulph. And that is something that when the sheriff tells Ranulph at the end, you'll leave the field, those are my orders, I think he knows that if he dies, Sir Ranulph won't do it. But there's not much he can do about it. He'll be dead. So he gives the order to let the fight happen because on some level the sheriff wants Robin as much as Robin wants the sheriff. You talk about the friendship between men. The enmities between men that go back as long as those two, it's a legend, but there are historical analogs. If you have somebody as your big enemy for decades, and you really press each other and really fight each other and both still survive, you're intimate with them in a way that you aren't with your lover, your spouse, your children. Your enemy knows you in ways that no one else will, and vice versa. And that's the kind of relationship Robin and the sheriff have. So, there. Anyway, the worksheet is due tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed the movie, and we move on. I'm going to talk a bit about about Magna Carta. So let's remind ourselves, or I will remind you, about just how effective Prince John is at making enemies. Prince John simultaneously makes an enemy of the Pope. Now, in making an enemy of the Pope, John is excommunicated. Not only is John out of the Christian church for the time being, but John is also all of the oaths of loyalty to him that people have made by God are now in doubt. Because the church says that John is not a good king. As an evil man or a non-Christian king, should anyone obey John? The church calls that into question. Ruby. So, there's that. But because John is excommunicated, no one in England can receive sacraments. That means if you have a baby born, the baby can't be baptized. Not until John makes right with the Pope. If you have two young lovers who are desperate to become married, no one's getting married until John makes up with the Pope. If you have an old relative or a young relative who dies, no one's getting a funeral. No one's getting last rites. No one's getting confession.
Come on, John.
Because John has had a rupture with the Pope. Until this rupture is healed, until this gap is sealed, the people of England are denied all of the various services that the Holy Church provides. Anna. What that means is the people of England are going to be very upset with John until he makes up with the Pope. That's the point of it. Emma?
Yes.
Okay. But that's not all. Because John is also dealing with a low-grade war with the Scots, who can invade England at any time. And those kilt-wearing barbarians are nothing to sneeze at once they get marching. But that's not all. Because John is involved in trying to conquer France from the King of France. But it's not just that he is simultaneously fighting the Pope, the Scots, the French. Also, John alienates his barons by claiming a royal supremacy over them that basically strips the barons of a lot of their rights and power. But that's not all. To pay for all of this, John raises taxes on everyone, including the people of England who can't pay it, because they'll starve. So, John has actually made enemies of everyone he deals with, except for the small group of cronies that he favors. And he realizes in 1215 that if he doesn't fix this situation, he's going to be overthrown. He doesn't know how exactly, but it's going to happen. So what is John going to do about it? He's going to pick one group to make up to. And by mollifying that one group, John will be, hopefully for him, in a position to maintain his throne against all the other enemies he's made. And the group he picks to mollify, make sure you have your notes in, is the barons. The barons of England, the noblemen of England, are the only other people in England who have military forces. And if they get irritated enough at him, they can march on his palace and overthrow him. So John listens to the complaints. Did I put that in the wrong place?
No.
Okay. Of the noblemen who write down all of their issues in what is called the Great Charter, known in Latin by its Latin name, Magna Carta. So, Magna Carta is presented to John in 1215 at Runnymede on 15th June, and John has a choice to sign it or not. But he really doesn't have a choice because he's made enemies of everyone, and he needs somebody to stop being his enemy. Magna Carta's many lines can be reduced and distilled down to two simple principles. The first principle, even the king is under the law. This is so important. Even the king is under the law. Okay, let's look at it from an inventor's point of view. Let's say you invent a wonderful new idea, product, invention, something that nobody has ever had before, but once you show it to them, they can't do without it. Emma?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just learning where people are now. If you are in a kingdom like France, where the king is above the law, let's say your invention starts making you a lot of money, and it also begins giving you much more power and status in society than you otherwise would have. Like some geeky dude who helps develop and steal computer program ideas from others. Bill Gates.
I mean,
What the King of France can do is decide, you know what? That's a national security matter. We need this product to be under royal supervision and royal control. So what we're going to do is we're going to take ownership of and control over this new invention. The king may pay you or not. The king may keep you involved or not. You can't do a thing about it because the king is above the law. If the king wants to claim your property, your intellectual property, your idea, he's going to do it. So this is discouraging to those people who are of a mind to invent something and take the risk of making it happen. However, in England, since the king is under the law, your rights to property are going to be protected. And no one, not even the king, will be able to steal your idea from you, not lawfully. That's one reason why it's important for the king to be under the law. Here's another reason. If the king is above the law, he in effect has what's called diplomatic immunity in terms of criminal justice. Do any of you remember from civics what diplomatic immunity is? Raise your hand if you do. So I'll ask you to tell me what it is. Yes?
Isn't it more like you can get away with some small stuff?
It's actually more than small stuff. About, I think 15, 20 years ago, a UN ambassador from some podunk third world country decided to partay in New York. And so the man got drunk as a lord, went driving, and killed an entire family. He could not be charged because he was an accredited diplomat of his country. The worst we could do is kick him out and hope that his own people would put him on trial, which of course they did because they're a corrupt dictatorship. A diplomat who is accredited is not subject to being prosecuted under the law of the host country. The reason for this is a basically good one. You don't want the local police to be able to harass your diplomats in other countries. But it can be abused. And that, what I just told you about, is a real abuse. In a country where the king is above the law, let's say the king accidentally hurts or kills somebody that you love. There's nothing you can do about it. If the king doesn't want to take responsibility, no one can make him because the king is above the law. So you end up with the rule of men rather than the rule of law, which is something I remember talking about in civics a lot last year. The rule of men is dictatorship. The rule of law is freedom. Because with laws, people are restrained in a fair, equitable way, and you are judged not on the basis of who you are, but on the basis of what you do. So this principle that even the king is under the law is going to be a big one. It's a big reason why Magna Carta is part of the genealogical history of the U.S. Constitution. The other thing that the king agrees to at Runnymede is this. The king must ask the barons and later the parliament for new monies. The king cannot simply say, I want to fight those Scots. I don't know why I'm talking like a Scot. Maybe that's why I want to fight them, because they're making me talk in their brogue. So, sorry about that, it just came to me. The king in another country would just raise taxes. Now the king has to ask the barons and later parliament. And the barons and parliament may say no. And the king has to accept it. Oh, that's so great. The people of England, through their lords, are getting an option to participate in government. Magna Carta is a step towards that. And it's what leads to the freedom that both Englishmen, Brits, and Americans hold dear today, including Australians, Canadians, and so forth. Anyone who has benefited from British freedom. So, even the king is under the law, and the king must ask for new monies. So let's talk about this. This is the last thing I'll do today. We're going to start with the Crusades tomorrow. How is the Magna Carta part of the genealogy of the heritage of the U.S. Constitution? Well, the oldest ancestor that we know of is Hammurabi's Code. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a life for a life among equals. And the law is going to reinforce the social order. A son that grows up smacking daddy around is going to be a man who attacks the king and rebels. So a son that strikes his father gets his hand chopped off. So an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a life for a life among equals, and the law reinforces the social order. That's Hammurabi's Code. Then we come to the Ten Commandments, which is a law of freedom, because it's not about the law being imposed on you. It's about you as a believer choosing to restrain yourself. I'm the Lord your God. You shall have no false gods before me. Make no graven image. Keep holy the Sabbath day. Honor your father and mother. You shall not kill, or that means murder. You shall not steal. You shall not lie. You shall not covet your neighbor's goods, nor your neighbor's wife. There are a few religious laws, keeping holy the Sabbath, having no loyalty before God. That's what we just talked about with Marian. But beyond that, they're good social laws. Don't want what isn't yours. Don't take what isn't yours. Don't twist the truth. Don't murder. But people are encouraged to do that themselves, to impose law on themselves out of faith in God. The Athenian constitutions basically set up a system of popular government and against corruption. The 12 tables, laws must be public so that everyone, no matter who they are, can be judged the same way, fairly, equitably under the law. The Roman Constitution, which is unwritten, sets up a republican form of government, which the U.S. government is based upon. Justinian, the Byzantine emperor after the Roman Empire falls in the West, sets up the Justinian Code, which clarifies and refines all Roman law from the 12 tables to him. It's about 1,000 years of law. Justinian's Code is the basis of the Napoleonic Code of Laws, which is the most common law code in the world today. Not in the U.S., but elsewhere. Magna Carta. Even the ruler is under the law. Even the ruler must ask for money from the people. The unwritten English Constitution, which gives Englishmen their freedom. The English Bill of Rights of 1689. The freedoms to speak, to assemble. A lot of freedoms that we have. The Enlightenment philosophers of the 16 and 1700s, like John Locke, who says in so many words, Jefferson adapts them, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights you cannot separate. These rights being life, liberty, and property. Why life? What God gives, you have no right to take away. Thou shalt not murder. Unless you're in war or killing a capital criminal, death penalty offense criminal, don't take a life. It's not yours to take. Second, liberty. You're rational people. You're good people. You're godly people. Therefore, you should be given the widest latitude to make important choices. That's liberty. It's not total anarchy, but it's the widest possible freedom in the belief and hope that a faithful, good person, capable of reason, will use that ability to choose well. Property. Property is indispensable for freedom. This is why. If you have property, you're secure enough in your own situation that you can tell the government to go bite me if you want to. Because, not in terms of disobeying the law, but in terms of being an active citizen. If you have no property, if you're dependent upon the government, you're like a dog sniffing at his master's hand for victuals. I love dogs, but I don't want human beings to be dogs. I don't want us so grateful and dependent upon our government that they become our masters and our owners, which is inevitably what happens. Property protects people from that. Without property, we are all dependent upon the government, and we are all slaves of that government. This leads us, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau's notion of the social contract says, if you benefit from society, its laws, its roads, its military defense, its regulations, you have to limit your freedom according to the laws of that society. You cannot kill someone for belching at you.
Why?
because you're in society. If you're in the Old West, if you're in an anarchy, yeah, shoot their bloody head off. If you're the Roman Emperor Caligula, who's above the law, yeah, you got a nephew who coughs all the time. Cut his head off. That way, no more coughing. But if you're in a society, a civil society of laws, you've got to restrain yourself to what the law allows and doesn't allow. That's where so. And that gives us the Constitution. Now, what's so great about it? Our Constitution is where our freedom comes from. Our freedom may come from God, but its legal basis is the Constitution. It's the oldest Constitution still in effect on Earth. In some ways, we're a very young country. We're only a few hundred years old, whereas European and Asiatic countries are thousands of years old. But, listen, our Constitution has been the form of government in this country since the late 1780s. No other form of government is as old as ours that's still operating. That freedom which we get to speak, to possess firearms, to assemble, that freedom against cruel and unusual punishment, against unreasonable searches and seizures, against a government gone wild, that freedom to be a minority, that freedom against tyranny, all of that comes from what that flag represents, the Constitution. It is the basis of our freedom, and it is the one thing that all Americans are obliged to be loyal to. I'll say that again. Your freedom comes from that. You're obliged to be loyal. Have a good day. Happy day. Bye-bye. Hope you enjoy your new seats. If you don't like them, sit somewhere else tomorrow.
So, do they walk in tomorrow? No.
Yeah. I want you to do that. Do it? Okay. Ooh, bye.